We're joined by France 24's Nadia Massih. Nadia, there's this sense, even as the airstrikes continue, even as there's problems at Israel's northern border, we'll talk more about that later.
Yeah.
But still, everyone's holding their breath for what's to come.
Yeah, I think you're right. You know, you heard there from just one of the family members of these hostages that are presumed captive now in Gaza. For them, clearly, this is such a painful moment as they wait to see whether or not Israel is somehow going to be able to safely bring those hostages back from Gaza. I think that's going to be an immense challenge for the Israeli army. And you mentioned it a bit earlier. We don't have a lot of information, but we have heard within the last hour or so that the Israeli army is now saying it's found bodies. It hasn't said of how many, but it has found some bodies on the frontier between Gaza and Israel. Those are bodies of hostages. For the rest of the families, of course, they're holding their breath. They're crossing their fingers to hope their people can be brought back safely. In Gaza as well, for the civilian Palestinian population, this is a huge moment as well, because that deadline for Palestinians to move out of the north of the Gaza Strip to below Wadi Gaza has now expired. Many Palestinians, as we've been reporting, of course, could not manage to get out of the north. Roads have been bombed. We saw a civilian convoy was hit yesterday, children among the people killed there. Other Palestinians, though, could have left the north, but they say they chose not to. I'm going to quote somebody here who said, look, this doesn't feel to me like an evacuation. This is a Palestinian civilian who was speaking to news agencies earlier, but a forcible expulsion of Palestinians that recalls for them what happened to the Palestinians in 1948, the Nakba, the Palestinian catastrophe when they were forced off their land. People now in Gaza fear what Israel is doing is preparing to reoccupy the northern bit and push them down towards the Sinai. So this is a huge, huge, huge moment for them.
Yeah, and we saw on Friday this statement by the Israeli military that it had made localized raids, ground raids into Gaza. They say now that it's in attempts to locate and rescue hostages. Earlier, France 24 spoke to military Colonel Peter Lerner.
So I can't go into specific details. There's a lot of sensitivity behind this. Obviously, there are still families and people that are unaccounted for in the aftermath of this terrible massacre, and that's still 1 week after they came into our houses and butchered babies in their bedrooms. So I won't go into specifics, but yes, we are operating in the area vicinity close to the fence, close to the border area, with small operations in order to localize, find, and try to identify people that were abducted to the Gaza Strip and bring them home. That is our operation. That is what we're doing. You know, Hamas are currently, I think, in a state of disarray as our operations increase, and we are doing everything now to be prepared for a potential ground operation. And that will mean that we have recruited some 300,000 reservists, and we are taking all the necessary precautions in order to be prepared on the Gaza front, but not only on the Gaza front, because there is also concern of the front on Lebanon with Hezbollah constantly conducting terrorist attacks against against forces at the border, including earlier today an attempted infiltration that we intercepted and took the terrorists out.
And again, we'll have more in a moment on what's happening at Israel's northern border. But we're with Nadia Massih right now. In the last minutes, new statements coming out from Israel's military talking about the next stage of the war with, quote, an emphasis on significant ground operations. We don't know, does that mean incursion, invasion, occupation?
We don't know, but we do know this is going to be very significant indeed. We've also heard in the last couple of hours from Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister, who's been speaking to soldiers near the frontier with Gaza. He said the next stage of the war is coming. I think we can expect this to be getting underway quite soon on the ground in Gaza. We do know as well that this is very likely to begin in the northern part of Gaza, above Wadi Gaza, because that's the area that Israel asked Palestinian civilians to evacuate from. Israel has massed an unprecedented number of reservists, over 300,000, that on top of the 160,000 or so in its regular army. So it's got soldiers of about 500,000 ready now.
Israel lost 66 soldiers the last time they had a major incursion back in 2014. For what lies ahead, this is going to be, it seems, a much higher cost both militarily and to civilians on both sides.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, first of all, militarily, of course, Israel is the greater military power here. Not only does it have more soldiers, it has control of the air as well, as we know from conflicts like Ukraine, how important it is to have control over the skies. But yes, you're right. When you look at, for example, what happened in 2014 in Gaza, or indeed, if you remember, in the conflict in Lebanon back in the day between Israel and Lebanon, both Hamas and Hezbollah have tunnels underneath the territory that they control, that they could move people and weapons around pretty easily. The map we're showing you here is from the 2014 war. That's when you can kind of get a sense of some of the tunnels that Hamas was using then. And I wouldn't be surprised in this conflict, Francois, if one of Israel's first priorities is to try and target those tunnels, bomb the tunnels, make sure they're not completely operational from Hamas, because that is a way that they will try to move around and advance against Israel here.
And again, show us on the map here where that line you were talking about is.
Wadi Gaza. Well, Wadi Gaza cuts through the centre, but we know that there are so many civilians who've been unable to move from the north to the south right now. And you mentioned the civilians as well. There's huge concerns for those civilians that are stuck in the north of Gaza. A really, really difficult situation for them. Israel talking about it wants to crush Hamas. How will it crush Hamas when so many civilians remain trapped in Gaza? Over 2 million people stuck there.
And one final quick point here. At the bottom of that map is the main
Rafah.
crossing with Egypt, Rafah. And we know that the U.S. Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, so far unsuccessful in brokering any kind of an opening there with Egypt.
Unsuccessful for the moment. I mean, what the Americans have told American Palestinian dual nationals, those with American documents, is if you feel it is safe enough, get yourself down to the border at Rafah. We understand that dozens of about 500 to 600 US dual nationals are there waiting for the green light, hoping to be able to go through. There seems to be some kind of block. It may be coming from the Egyptian side. There's been some reporting that Egyptians want aid to be able to come into Gaza before they'll allow anybody to come out. So we don't have that confirmation for the moment. And of course, just being in Rafah isn't particularly safe either. Rafah was bombed 3 days ago as well. So perhaps one of the best documents you can have right now if you're in Gaza is a foreign piece of paper, but even those people are stuck at the border right now.
Many thanks, Nadia Massih. And